Okay, the meeting is live streamed. So you see there is a notification which has come, so it is live streamed. Okay, so let's start. We are talking about unit 70 and 73. We had looked in, and this is also the last, class in terms of MDIE 1, gender and diaspora. We had looked in the earlier classes that most of the early migration studies had focused on men because it was a understanding or the stereotypical understanding that it is only the males who travel because people travel for work and it's only the males. Women, if they travel, would typically join their spouses or husbands. uh, it was much later figured out that even during the slave trade or indentured labor from India, there were women, there were single women, and a women's experience of a migration is vastly different from a men's experience. The challenges faced by women are vastly different from challenges faced by men. And unless there is study in terms of women, in their terms of experience, and also simultaneously a large number of independent single women now started migrating as students, as professionals, as travel persons, as holiday makers, that perforce the scholars and the academia needed to also study the gendered migration. And with a large amount of women making this migratory move, scholars started using the term feminization of migration. The males still are more than women, but women also constitute a large proportion of the migratory or the migration scenario, and that is why more research and studies are being done on women. Okay. So let's look at the background. Okay. While parents continue to identify themselves with the country of origin, second generation children much closer to that inevitably is there. So if a family migrates, the first generation migrants will obviously be there in an alien culture. They would relate back to homeland. While if the children are born in a new culture and they go through the course of education in a new culture, they will start identifying themselves with the new culture. It's the same thing what happens with rural to urban migration or migration from one city to another. Nationally, if you let's say migrate from Delhi to Bombay, Bombay has a vastly different culture from Delhi. The first generation keeps remembering Delhi. The second generation, brought up in Bombay, studied in Bombay, learns the language, and so on and so forth. Process of assimilation integration has been found to be more effective in second generation than first generation. And subsequent generations get more and more integrated with the host country. 19th-20th century, women were passive partners in immigration and diaspora formation process. Uh, it's not that women were passive partners, but the women were deemed to be passive partners. In fact, this book by Peggy Mohan Jahajin shows that women on the ship, when they were taken for indentured labor, were showing agency. They were not passive, they were active. But the fact is, obviously, the way the scholars looked at or the lens through which they looked at women, it was as just passive partners. Change in 21st century, women assumed a dominant role in immigration. Now outnumber their male counterparts. Women also common link between the first and second generation, and inevitably, women always are, the way the culture transmits forward. If you see majority of the festivals nationally, you see that women are the ones who are at the foreground of participation. Men take a passive role. Historically, choice of leaving home for a new location was decided by men. Onus of retaining memories of home. recreating them with new context, acting as harbinger of, was associated with women. This also could also be because as modern human being came into being and the role of men and women got defined, with men identifying with going outside the house and working, and women staying at home and giving caregiving. There also historically women were equal partners with men, but as as civilization happened, uh, women were confined to homes. In fact, if you look at ancient India had a lot of independent women, who showed agency. In fact, it was the British who came in and brought in their, Victorian concepts and did a lot of change to the Indian society. Women's central role as homemakers, diasporic culture, traditional gender norms kept men engaged in work, while women were confined in domestic walls as homemakers, primarily mothers, wives, sisters, care of home. This was also the way cultures, kept women in check. You will be surprised to know a very interesting nugget of information when we come to MDI 9 and we are studying human trafficking. When initially, when the white women started becoming liberalized and started moving, the white man brought in the concept of white women slaves to prevent women from migrating. So a lot of times laws which are typically in a male dominated world, in a patriarchal setup, are framed to be restrictive to women for bearing and rearing of children. Migration to new land, women act as custodians of their cultural heritage, which is a natural process. They employ multiple strategies for preservation, reproduction of memories at home, family values, and cultures within new geography. And that is why, if you see, migrants seem to hold on to the home country's culture much more strongly than even the home country. And that's what I was saying in a class or two before, that Indians who went to America hold on to the ritualistic and the religion side of India much more vigorously than what we Indians in India do. And their concept of India is still of the 60s and 70s, while India of the 2026 is much more modern and has moved. They are also the ones who form nodal points of interaction between home and host countries, culture, and devise ways to handle cultural differences, point of conflict between diverse social groups. So, women has a multifarious role in terms of preserving cultures and working it with the host country. Both the weight of cultural representation through prescriptions concerning the appropriate appearances, behavior, deeply internalized culture, and religious traditions that often communicate to other social groups. Anti-colonial or racial minority contexts, religion, culture have been politically mobilized, and women have been called upon as cultural emblems or as cultural police in relation to other women. So that's how the weight the women bear. So it's a symbolic representation of women are not only cultural bearers of their families or communities, but also of nations. So when they say this is not Indian or this kind of lifestyle is not Indian, you are almost imposing, the cultural bearing of a nation onto a woman. Represent the nation through moral values. For example, a great representation is the Hindi movies and the dialogues they have of a Hindi movie in terms of, how the family's tradition or the family's respect comes through the woman, and the men go scot-free. to reproduce the national ethnic group in biological as well as cultural terms. So these are various studies which have been done, which have found this out. We see that, as I again say, India becomes a microcosm of the larger, movement across borders. Important work entitled Women Nation State laid the groundwork for understanding the connection between women and national ethnic processes. Women as reproducers of the boundaries of ethnic and national groups, transmitter of its culture, signifier of ethnic national differences, ideological discourse used in the construction, reproduction, and transformation of ethnic and national categories. So, in this New York parade, I was seeing on the 80th Independence Day of India, uh, you could see the women, wearing those traditional saris, the cultural symbols of Indianness, the way they were expected to stand on the stage or behave. uh, Inevitably, it gets linked of ethnic and national categories. Case study of Indian diaspora in South Africa, indentured women's unique struggle in the spirit for community, family, and religion brought them together. Practice of Indian tradition in a foreign land provided them with sense of normality, security. Now, also we need to understand this bearer of culture also is brings them a sense of security and belonging. Think about the fact that you are in an alien culture where you are not able to understand the language, you're not able to understand the religion, you're not able to understand the various cultural constructs, and in that case, this cultural continuity or meeting somebody of a similar culture provides a sense of normality, security, belonging. So there is this video on YouTube in case you go and check out. In the 60s, there were this group of young girls from Kerala who went to Germany as nurses. And this was organized by the Church Association of Germany in India. And they could not speak German. They did not, there was a vast difference of culture. The only thing which kept them together was religion, Christianity. They were able to go to church and bond with each other and get a sense of comfort. It's a wonderful documentary. You can check it out. You can search for women who went, girls from villages in Kerala who went to as nurses in Germany in the 60s. You can search it out, you'll get that video. It's a wonderful documentary. How how they went about, how do they survive out there, how then they learned the language, how they married, what kind of problems happened after marriage because men from Kerala had to go patriarchal. The men had a particular understanding of roles, could not adjust, and so on and so forth. This not only strengthened the unique Indian identity, but also enabled them to perceive and recreate their culture in a new geographical context. Culture is what gives us a sense of security and comfort. Indianness has not only survived but has been reimagined and transmitted across generations over the last 160 years. This is again an older study. I'm sure there are newer studies which have been done. Have to face conflict and struggle to retain their culture, as was noticed among Indians in South Africa. There was a cultural struggle to practice, preserve, and promote Indian heritage, propagating their language, clothing, food, festival, and tradition. With the second and third generation, there is something what is called as code switch. The code switch is typically the second and the third generation practice a particular culture at home and practice another culture in public. So there is a very famous movie of Gurvinder Chadha called Bend Him Like Beckham. It's about an Indian family in London where the girl wants to play football The family wants her to learn to cook so that she can marry and make a good wife, whereas she wants to play football. So when she's out with the friends, she's speaking British English. She's playing football. When she's at home, she's speaking Punjabi. She's wearing Indian dresses, and she's able to code switch. Women were at the forefront of this struggle and were successful in transforming, for example, Durban into Little India, the largest Indian city outside India. Again, old research, Mukherjee 2011, took with them images, statues of their revered gods, jewelry, spices, food grains. Indians still do that. When they travel abroad, today, by far across the world, you can get Indian spices, you can get Indian, stuff, food, and yet Indians carry it. One of the reasons India carries a lot of stuff from India is because it's cheaper out here, it's costlier in their local currency, but I guess one of the also another thing is a continuity in terms of culture. These elements found their way into culture, cuisine, costume, traditions of their lives within South African society. This is a more recent study, 2020. Is westernized, assimilated well into the majority and South African culture, their values, education, media, entertainment, and food. Their Indianness retrieve and safeguard Indian values, cultural traditions, cuisine, transmit them into future generations. That's possibly one of the reasons why a lot of Indians outside want to come and marry in India. In fact, there are websites which search for Indian mates, and that itself is a very interesting study why they want to come back and marry out here when you are staying in a different culture. Is indigenized, localized, and hybridized, getting resilience to and inevitably cultures do change. Whenever you are mixing with a different culture, there is a certain amount of hybridization. There's a certain what the term is creolization. Food lies at the basis of the discourse, as do gender relation. And then to add to it, there is the transnational networks which are at play. Women have resisted overtly through political activism and covertly by closing ranks and maintaining strong ethnic and religious networks and cultural practices. So women show a lot of agency. It's that many a times in research, the focus is on men. So if you see, I give you a very interesting example. If you would have seen the movie Gandhi by Richard Attenborough, the famous movie, the focus is on Gandhi mobilizing people when he first reaches out there by burning the passes. The focus was not there that his wife also mobilized women, and they were also there supporting the men and burning passes. That was showing agency. But the story was told using Gandhi as the protagonist. The wife had a supporting role. So it all depends on how your research is and how the focus is. Along these lines, women have appropriated male dominated public spaces, create a sense of community to celebrate indigenized delights of diaspora food. So this Peggy Mohan book, Jahazan, has a lot of places where they show women's agencies and how women are grappling with this situation and how they circumvent, how they negotiate, traditional roles or issues which crop up and how they go about. So examples from South Africa, Indian cuisine blended with South African flavors. Women incorporated traditional Zulu ingredients like amasi, fermented milk drink, relishes like chakalaka, spicy vegetable condiments. One of the most iconic dishes and true symbol of Indian South Asian is called Bani Chow, a spicy Indian curry served in a bowl of hollowed out bread. Indian indentured labor and is a staple food in South Africa. So it's not just the migrant, changes or there are incorporations in the migrant culture, but there are also changes in the host culture. So, for example, Indian curry is now world known. In fact, a lot of South Asian restaurants, including people from Bangladesh or Pakistan, go by the Indian names. If you look at it historically, the South Asia was one before the British came and kind of did the divisions. So if you look at Bangladesh or Pakistan and their cultures, we are almost the same. Language: South African Indians speak at least five Indian languages: Tamil, Telugu, Gujarati, Hindi, and Urdu, along with English, Afrikaans, and Bantu language. Language thus help preserve the diversity of Indian diaspora. So language becomes a part of culture, language, religion, cuisine, dress, religious festivals becomes a very important part, mix of Hindus, Muslims, Christians, Jains, Zoroastrians, and agnostics. 80% of indentured immigrants that came were Hindus, about 12% Muslims, and the rest were Christians. So again, and a large part of the indentured labor were from the lower caste, but they were upper caste people also, and again, it always appeared that the indentured labor were men, they were Muslims, they were women, they were single women. So it was a very interesting, read. For many years, women perform most religious functions at home, which is what we see locally also in most of the religious festivals. Women are at the forefront, bound to domestic duties, make the observance of religious rituals relatively easy. Age and experienced grandmothers and elder female members guided on ritual procedures, rites of passage such as death, or celebratory occasions such as birth or marriage ceremony, which is natural. Over successive generation, women have become more active economically, therefore less interest, and which is always the case because once economics comes into the big picture, time becomes less. Then you try and split your time, which they learned from earlier generation. So there is a very interesting story which a friend of mine from Karnataka told me, a Kannada guy who was talking about a friend who saw this in their house, that the family would get up at 5 o'clock, tie their cat, and then sleep. So he couldn't understand what was going on, why was the family doing that, till the time he did some research to find out that actually earlier the family used to get up at 5 o'clock, do religious rituals. When they were doing religious rituals, they would offer milk to the god, and the cat would come and drink the milk. So, inevitably, they would tie the cat, do the religious rituals. Over a period of time, the religious rituals stopped being done in the family, but the process of tying the cat continued. It's a very funny anecdote. Then there are ethnic dresses and attires. Indian immigrants have adopted the traditional clothing patterns and styling. And it's not just Indian immigrants, immigrants from across the world. You see Korean, you see Vietnamese, you see Chinese. They, wear ethnic dresses on their festivals, their occasions. Creativity and effort of women folk, the Indian attire among Hindus, Muslim, Christian has survived in turban, though with some modification, which again is the case. Then Indian movies, TV channels easily accessible. Indian languages are less frequently spoken among our younger generations of persons of Indian origin. Bollywood films and TV shows with English subtitles are quite popular. Again, I think this is a older thing. in terms of a newer thing. TikTok becomes, and if you see, TikTok and Reels have become a great medium for coming back of a lot of music and cinema which was lost. In fact, TikTok and Reels have given life to a lot of old songs, which are, and you will see a lot of Indian music being used by TikTok across the world for making TikToks and Reels. So there was this news item about US diaspora helps Philippines make World Cup history. In fact, the US football team is comprised of migrants. Uh, if you saw the latest World Cup cricket, the US team is comprised predominantly of South Asian. New Zealand, Australia, England, you'll see they are comprised of immigrants. Football World Cup, you see the European teams are exclusively, dominated by black talent, by immigrants. It's a very interesting, thing to see out there. So let's look at, how laws or how laws work in restrictive ways, how various immigration laws or how various laws made work against gender. In place of regulating or creating policy for properly managing and regulating invisible work, many countries have enacted restrictive policy to safeguard their worker. Two schools of thought represent their different views on the enactment of regulating policy for women migrants. So more often than not, in terms of making policy, some of the laws adversely affect women. One school believes that a large number of migration policies for women are restrictive in nature. These policies regulate the migration flow and reduce the possibility for regular and legal migration for women. And we have also seen in earlier units, when laws are restrictive, more often than not, people do not stop, but start taking illegal routes. And illegal routes lead to problems for the individuals as well as for the countries. On the other hand, some scholars believe that regulating policies stand as a major tool to protect women's migration from exploitation. In fact, this is the explanation which is given for laws made, that it helps to protect women migration from exploitation. But unless the stakeholders are taken in play and the laws are made with various stakeholders, many laws goes against women. For example, the H-1B visa plays a vital role in the United States. Legal entry permit for temporary workers permits spouse and unmarried children of temporary workers to stay in US under dependent category. Any changes in the percentage of H-1B will directly impact the flow of immigration in the United States, which is what is working out. So, for example, recently I was seeing a news item whereas US has imposed a bond of $20,000 for 50 African countries. Now, inevitably, if you introduce such a bond, then it is restrictive for the women, because if there is a migration which will happen, the men would like to take it rather than give it to the women. For example, the government of India has allowed women to out-migrate for work, but with certain conditions. Can only take place through state-run recruiting agencies like NORCA, ODEPC, OMCL, UPFC. Now, again, how the process works is the important part. Also understand the fact there is quite a possibility that the women might be illiterate or may come from a backward socio-economic category. How does then that thing happen? How do they negotiate this? Overseas employment for nurses, policy framers have made it mandatory that the immigration of nurses for overseas employment in ATCR countries require immigration clearance. Now, how difficult is this process for immigration clearance? If the process becomes too difficult and too expensive and too cumbersome, people will take a non-legal route, which we have seen over a period of time. So there is something called an ECR in India. Applicant wants to go abroad, particularly listed to 18 ECR countries and has not passed 10th grade. So one way to look at it is it's protecting women which are not literate from exploitation. But another way to look at it is the fact that if a female is not literate, this becomes restrictive. Especially if there is a major bureaucratic process in getting this ECR. And in fact, if you, in your SLM, there are case studies or examples given from all South Asian countries, how the laws seem to be restrictive against women. So there is this, news item from Asia Pacific, unwomen.org, but has already experienced hardship. As an agriculture, she could not sustain. After she sold off her land to travel to Dubai, she realized that middlemen had duped her. And more often than not, these people who dupe are known to these people. They do deceit, and the state cannot help. And the state comes and says that they did not take the legal route. But the legal route sometimes is so difficult and so cumbersome and so bureaucratic that people don't have a choice. So if you read this news item, you can search this news item on the following, web link I have given below. You can take a screenshot and check out the web link. I don't know whether this story is still there or not. There is also a possibility that stories disappear. Then they go into the Internet archives. Okay, so there are some general laws which are, for example, to promote decent work, ILO is enacted. And as I told you in the class yesterday, ILO as an international organization looks at human rights, enacts laws, but then, or conventions, but then it depends on individual states to incorporate them in their national laws. More often than not, states turn a blind eye to these conventions and international treaties. ILO has enacted Convention concerning decent work for domestic workers and Recommendation 2.1. Valuable guidelines that promote measures to be taken to protect domestic workers, enacted to safeguard domestic workers. But more often than not, these guidelines are overlooked by various states. Convention of Domestic Practices provisions are enacted to protect. Guys, can you hear me? I'm getting a message. My internet connection is unstable.
All good, sir.
Okay, perfect. I suddenly got a message on my screen. My internet is unstable. Right. So, yes, as I said, unless there is dovetailing of the international conventions and national laws, more often than not, the domestic workers or migrant workers, you know,
We are losing you, sir, now.
are left, without any protection. So, yes, Asya?
We just lost you for a bit.
Am I back or not?
You're back. You're back. You're back.
Okay, okay. I can see my internet connection showing some crazy symbols. Anyway, are you able to see the slide?
Yes, sir.
The slide is clear.
Okay, perfect, perfect. So are able to read what I'm, talking about. And as I was talking about, unless these international conventions are dovetailed into national laws, they are of not much value in terms of migrants. And inevitably, the migrants suffer more than the natives, because the migrants anyway are in a precarious situation. They are dealing with the new culture, they are dealing with the new situation, and then and many a times they are discriminated against, and then women always face a double whammy because of gender as well as being a migrant. There is a UN Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW, ensures protection of the right of women, including the right to employment, decent work condition, and social security. And in the morning only we saw, yesterday we saw how COVID-19 pandemic was so discriminatory against women. It was women migrants who first lost their jobs. So, in spite of all these conventions and international treaties, more often than not, uh, women still get the raw end of the stick. There's an international convention on protection of the rights of all migrant workers and member of their families. Uh, and we again, it's interesting to see that the US, which was at the forefront of and the West, which talks about human rights, protection of human beings, the US is separating children from families because of politics. So then you start to wonder what is going on, why is it? But we also need to understand how the politics negotiates with the economics, how the politics negotiates with human rights, how these international organizations are able to, put pressure on individual states. And many a times the state overlooks, this whatever has, happened in terms of all that progress that we made to have same working conditions as citizens without specifying separate rights for female workers, inhuman living conditions, physical and sexual abuse, rights of migrants to freedom of thought, expression, religion, and access to courts.
So just to refresh few points that you have mentioned, which has got my
Yes, SK.
attention, is that like this all discussion, what now we are doing, comes under into the intellectual category. Okay.
Okay.
Now, what happens, like example, if you come to a place where very normal people lives in, who do not have much of this idea, it is very difficult to make them understand
Correct.
your importance.
Correct.
Okay. Even and this
Correct.
is my personal experience.
Correct.
And obviously, what happened, people may not find you the value.
Correct.
They might see you as somebody is equal to somebody else.
Correct.
And obviously, you will keep on losing your value over time.
Correct.
This is this problem I'm also facing. That even like going very illiterate places, remote
Correct.
places, tribal places.
Correct.
Okay, it is very difficult to make them to put some point so that they can get hold of you.
Correct.
That is one that I have realized.
Okay.
And second point is that what you have told that law, whatever law is there versus the governing body. Sometimes what happens is all these laws and all mostly are made by higher level people, bureaucrats and all. But in our
Correct.
country, unfortunately, the governing peoples who are governed in these like in political parties or
Correct.
other domain, they are not
Cor-
that much of educated. Okay,
Correct.
got my point. And suppose you
Correct.
are a
SK.
higher level scholar, tomorrow somebody is about 8th standard will govern you whether you can go to US or not. And if
Correct.
they don't find you in their favor, they may hold your passport, or they may create some problem in your
Correct.
police verification, etc.
Correct.
And this happens in a state where the people of intellectual people versus the lower or bottom level peoples.
SK, all your points are correct, and it's not an India specific situation. It happens across the world. And also the fact is, you're absolutely right. That is where everybody does not understand, or everybody is not aware about various things. But that is where, in a liberal democracy, or in a democracy which elects its rulers, uh, the role of media becomes important in educating people. But besides media, there's a role of executive in implementing laws. So even if there is a international law which, for example, an international convention on protection of rights of all migrant workers, if that is not incorporated into a state law, like a country's law, and if, for example, the judges are not aware about a law, or the executive, which includes the police, are not aware about the law, or the media, which highlights situations, are not aware of this law, then obviously the law becomes nothing but a piece of paper. You're absolutely right. And then individual people in politics, in executive, in legislation, have always the ability to manipulate the system, which is
Right.
across the board, across the world. You see the US for all the human rights, or you see the West for all the human rights they talk about liberal democracies. Look at the way the US entered Venezuela, arrested its president, and took them to New York as a prisoner for all the sovereignty rights and the way US bombed Iran. So you also need to understand there's an active negotiation which happens between states, between how these policies are enacted, what kind of pressure groups come in, and that is why these international NGOs become pressure groups in trying to get states to implement international conventions and treaties. Not every time it is successful. The idea of this is the fact that the world understands, or the world intellectual community understands the fact that this should be the roadmap for us. SK?
Right.
Okay. Let's move forward. There's a UN protocol to prevent suppressed persons, especially women and children. Exploitative situations such as domestic work. Provides migrants with right to human treatment, aims to stop transnational organized crime of trafficking, person trafficking, especially women and children, 2000. It was called the Palermo Protocol because it was signed in a place known as Palermo. There are some issues and challenges. Women are largely semi and unskilled workers. Illiteracy becomes a major burden on women.
And for like that
And
woman, for example, for the women, what you have mentioned, we always try to empower women's or women's reservation in various places and all. But some of the
okay,
instances that has happened, like where, as you see your slide, woman from Bangladesh, she went to work in Gulf country, and then from there he was sent to somebody else where he was little exploited, little bit of physically, and then that make issues and all, and somehow she came back and returned to Bangladesh. So
correct,
what happens? Sometimes the employer who also recruit the domestic like women for they also get little worried about. And because of the reputation and all that happens,
correct.
and if the woman spread that news everywhere, and that also has impacted our migration.
Correct. See,
Hmm.
it
What
works.
are
It works both ways. There are multiple. That's why I said when policies get made or when laws are framed, unless stakeholders and situations are taken into considerations, inevitably chaos results. So when you
right?
decide on a particular route, you have to look at the fact that particular route, there is not too much of bureaucratic handle. There has to be a fine balance. Unfortunately, as I was talking yesterday, bureaucracy, state bureaucracies are much more rigid. They are much more slow. The world and people move in much faster ways. And that is the reason why across the world there are issues which are happening. Okay. Among other issues and challenges, they get hired on low wages, they work for long periods. Women face a double whammy in terms of being a woman, in terms of gender, and in terms of being a migrant. Outbreak of COVID-19 impacted mobility of workers, nature of workers who are involved in care and emotional work. Condition of domestic work mostly remain unnoticed because it's an invisible industry. Work is there in private. Nature of work makes them vulnerable to exploitation. So these are issues. Also, issues and challenges include issues of illegal migration or migration without documentation is one of the biggest challenges. Many incidences of illegal migration and human trafficking have been reported despite existence of policy. So, if you look at the fact that if all countries make migration legal and open up all channels where people can, come in freely, what would happen? Because earlier, before the advent of nation states, people were migrating freely. Now, that's where politics comes in. So, for all the noise which is made about European culture, for example, there were riots in Ireland where the Irish people were saying that their culture is being corrupted by all these migrants. What is the percentage of migrants which are coming in? And if you make all these channels open, let's say if today traveling to US or going into US was easy, do you think everybody will pack up their bag and go to the US? No. How many will go? In the absence of evidence-based research, more often than not, it's the political rhetoric which takes over. And down the line, this undocumented becomes a biggest challenge because of lack of migration governance or lack of proper migration governance. States across the world know that people want a better deal. As I was talking in a class yesterday, what prevents US instead of going to war in spending $1 trillion in most of the Latin American countries to bring in industry so that the people don't need to migrate? Or what prevents India from opening up factories in the rural areas so that people from rural areas find work and don't migrate into cities? That requires a lot of evidence-based research, that requires a lot of work, that requires public, a vision. More often than not, politics becomes a shortcut. So let's sum up. Critical role played by women as carriers of cultural tradition, virtue of their roles as wives, mothers, homemakers, tasked with rearing, socializing next generation. Women's role still traditionally is that of caregiving or bringing up a family. Men's role traditionally is of earning bread or going out and working. Roles are changing. A large amount of women are entering into workforce, which is affecting families, which is changing demography. Even though Indian women usually migrate within the patriarchal framework and cultural consideration, supposed to preserve it as bearer of Indian tradition, process of migration and economic self-dependence give them an opportunity to assert independence and redefine their roles and assert their selfhood and identity. You see that inside the country, you see that when they migrate. Discuss restrictive labor. Yeah, SK?
And even and then even in India, even working with a group of women, if you want to do some work, social work, example,
Correct.
or with some self-help group to mobilize women in various ways and all. What happens? This I did some experiment that I'm sharing.
Okay.
You are supposed doing some on your good motives.
Okay.
Okay, now you have continued this research on women's, etc., on certain this thing, and after certain time, you may feel that the woman has mobilized against you.
Ah, correct.
And you don't know then who is driving them. So that is another the things I'm saying, and
No, no,
particularly
SK,
in our
you are SK, you are
Indian political context,
no, no, SK, you
because
are
women's
absolutely right, because real life situations work out much more differently than when we sit in a classroom and do theoretical understanding. And that's why I keep emphasizing research-based evidence. Unless there are research-based evidence in terms of what happened, what went, you are absolutely talking about something, SK, where there might be some other party who is feeling threatened because of your work, who is drumming
right,
support, from these women against you.
right,
It's a listen, at the end of the day, all human beings are political. For any person to come back and say we are not political is a falsehood. It's a
right,
wrong notion. In all
right, right,
situation, politics do play a role, even in migration governance, even in lawmaking. Everything there is politics which come into play. And it's not that you say politics should not come. Politics is a part and parcel of everything that we do. In household,
Mhm.
politics happen between parents and children, between siblings. There is a politics, so we need to understand that. Okay, under general law category, we looked
and
at
just one more point
yes,
about
SK,
this
SK.
thing. Even some news came in newspapers and all,
Hmm.
uh, between students versus the professors.
Hmm.
Okay, this kind of things also keeps on coming. Uh,
Absolutely.
where students as a like a female complain about his professor, where she
Correct.
studies in sexual domain.
Correct.
And obviously the professor then get very shivering. Uh,
Correct.
and that also affects our education system.
So
Like
SK,
people
that is
who are
that that
teaching,
is SK, that is the reason why policies need to be made which take care of general, work behavior. Unfortunately, if you notice in, let's say, our Indian academy or Indian universities, how many universities you will come where there is a sexual harassment policy in place? What is the general policy in terms of how a person is supposed to behave? All these guidelines are a policy is not framed up. If a policy is framed up, it is not taken into consideration. Neither there is a stakeholder, discussions are at stake. Then what is the escalation mechanism? In corporate houses, escalation mechanisms are not clearly defined. And time and again, we come across news item whereby, say, for example, there was this interesting news item which came up from the US in one of the big financial companies. This Indian man accused his female boss of sexual harassment, and there was an internal committee which was put into place with when they found out that the complaint was bogus. So that is where policies become important. Unfortunately, when policies are not in place, a lot of ad hocism happens. When a lot of ad hocism happens, then things go in a chaotic mode, and we see a lot of chaos because we don't like to frame policies. We are shy of framing
right,
policies.
right, 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 right.
Okay.
And even to deal this kind of what you call issues, even in some example in the West Bengal, the governor of the West Bengal, earlier governor was Mr. Bose.
Ah,
Hmm. He was an IS officer.
okay.
Some groups of women uh, did similar kind of things with him.
Okay.
Hmm. and he was little bit of what you call uncomfortable situations and all.
Oh, okay.
That news also was coming for some time. Now CV Anand Bose. He was the
Let's
governor of
not
the West
SK, let's
Bengal.
not take names. Let's not take names because these are live streams. Let's not
Okay.
take names.
So I'm saying this kind of things comes up.
Definitely.
Or,
Definitely.
or when you handle with the women's and their migration and all those things.
This okay. The connection broke and we are back. Guys, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The connection broke and we are back. We had almost finished and I can see the YouTube link on the WhatsApp group. You can check up the YouTube link. Any questions? Let me switch on my video. Hi. Any questions? Sasya, Nikita?
No, sir.
Okay.
Everything.
I hope I didn't go too fast.
No, sir. Not wrong.
Okay, thankfully. Sometimes, because I do a lot of classroom teaching, you are able to look at the students and then, decide your pace. Because
Right.
here I'm seeing a blank screen. Many a times I'm not able to decide my pace.
No, sir. All good. All good.
Okay, perfect, perfect. Any questions?
Not for now.
Okay. So again, as I said, many a times when you're writing an examination at the end of the semester, you can definitely relate to yourself when you're writing a question, and you can give an anecdote or an example to make your point. So that will help the examiner understand that this is what you are trying to say and this is how you have understood the topic, and will help you clear the examination. Remember, the thing about the examination will be you would need to craft your answers, need adequate keywords. I keep repeating or I keep highlighting keywords that you need to use. So once you do that, things should be easy. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, wonderful. You guys have a wonderful week ahead, and we'll meet next week on Saturday with hang on, what is next week? Oh, there is Sasya. Hi, Sasya. Next week, Saturday, we are talking about MDIE 2. I think it is diasporas in India or something. So we will start with that. There are two new top modules that we pick up, MDIE 2 and MPSC 1. So these are the new things that we are going to take. Most of these units, in case you have not received the SLMs, are available on eGyan Kosh. eGyan Kosh again is a website which notoriously goes offline many a time. So in case you see it offline, please be patient and try again. There's a virtue in being patient. So you can try again, you can download those units, you can read it so that you are in touch. Most of them are simple. In case there is a question, you can ask me. And as I said, you can always simultaneously, while we are talking, you can Google, use AI Assist, always cross verify because these are notorious to give wrong answers. And always pick up, when you cross reference with known, databases or known scholars. You can check out the scholars. Don't take anything at face value what you find on the net.
Right.
Because, there is a term called astroturfing on the net. Astroturfing is artificial. Everything can be made artificial.
Okay.
there was this story of this bored Chinese housewife who created a whole Wikipedia entity on royalty in Russia. And people actually started citing her references till some guy actually cross-referenced and they found out that everything was fake.
Right.
We have enough examples from our own country.
Hmm.
Okay, so have a wonderful week ahead and we'll catch each other up next Saturday at 12 o'clock. Bye, guys. Bye.